Do you have the clicker?
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being here at this wonderful Wildlife Conservation Network. It's so wonderful to be back with the WCN family. It's also wonderful to follow Marisette. For many years in my teenage years, I actually wanted to be a marine biologist. And sometimes I wonder to myself, how did I end up in a landlocked country in the middle of southern Africa, which is Botswana? And then I look out at the Kalahari grasslands, and I think that for hundreds of miles, there's very little human development. And I realize that I have found my ocean of wilderness in the center of southern Africa. And I wanted to start our presentation with my first experience of seeing a cheetah family in the wild. And these cheetahs were not in wide open savannas in one of the many protected areas, national parks and reserves that Botswana has. They were in a very small reserve in the center of bushlands and grasslands in the middle of farming areas, cattle posts and fenced ranches. And we were doing tracking surveys to count the numbers of cheetahs that were utilizing this reserve. And we came across this lovely family in the late summer, in the late afternoon sun. And they were just playing in the grassland, running across the deep sand road. So we stopped to watch them and really enjoyed the interactions in their family. And one of the bravest of all of them was a young male. And I sort of named him Naledi because this means star in the local language Setswana. And sometimes, as Marisette said, conservation can be very challenging, and you have to have these special moments of connection with your focal species to inspire you to keep moving forward. And Naledi, he came up to the vehicle and he put his paws up on the tire and he vocalized and he looked up at me and our eyes met. And I connected with him and it was a really, really beautifully touching moment. And it inspired me to keep moving and continues to do so. But I was really concerned about the family because soon this small reserve with its porous fences wasn't enough to conserve Cheetah's wide-ranging behaviors. And he would soon leave to navigate his way in the farmlands around. And cheetahs in the farmlands of Botswana have to be so adaptable and resilient in order to survive. And this wonderful experience sort of furthered my determination to support him and his family to continue to live in these landscapes. And cheetahs really do need our help. 100 years ago, they estimate there was around 100,000 cheetahs. And we've had such a population reduction due to human-wildlife conflict, habitat loss, declining prey populations, illegal wildlife trade, poaching, that today it's estimated we have just under 7,000 cheetahs left in our world. And their range has contracted considerably as well, and they now exist in only 23% of the areas where they used to roam. And one of the most important populations is the Southern African population, and between Botswana and Namibia, we have around 55% of the world's cheetahs left today. So we have a great responsibility to conserve these animals for Africa and for the world. Botswana has around 1,600 of these cheetahs as well. So we have a great opportunity to conserve them. And one of the wildest areas in Botswana is the south and the southwest, these beautiful Kalahari grasslands and bushlands. And this is where most of the cheetahs and the highest densities of cheetahs in Botswana live, and this is where our organization focuses its work. And as we see from the human footprint of Africa map, it's one of the least human impacted landscapes in Africa today. And it connects the huge Central Kalahari Game Reserve with the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. And this area between is an essential movement corridor. Being a semi-arid area, wildlife needs connectivity between protected areas and large landscapes in order to access resources seasonally. So we still have migrations of large ungulate species from the Central Kalahari Game Reserve down into the southwest. And the cheetahs are a fabulous flagship species for this environment. 80% of cheetahs in Botswana live outside of protected areas. And here they have to live together with predominantly farming communities, as it's one of the main forms of income generation for people living in this landscape. And of course, human-carnivore conflict is one of the greatest challenges that we're dealing with. So Cheetah Conservation Botswana was set up to meet this need. We use a holistic array of activities, including scientific research, reducing human-wildlife conflict, developing diversified livelihoods, as well as environmental education and influencing policy in order to pave a way for the future for cheetahs and other threatened carnivores in the Western Kalahari. One of our organizational focuses has always been alleviating human-carnivore conflict, and our farmer training program focus is on increasing knowledge about carnivores and sharing information on effective conflict mitigation tools that can enable coexistence. And we've trained over 5,000 cheetahs. There's not even that many in Botswana. 5,000 farmers over the last 15 years. And there's a waiting list for this training as well, and it's much appreciated by the farmers in the landscape. Just in July, we went to the Ngujane farmers, asked for some training workshops, and they're very close to the border of Namibia, and they had been experiencing increased conflict with cheetahs and African wild dogs, and they were looking for alternatives to lethal control and removal. So we went there and had workshops with those communities. And many of them will become the recipients of, and several of them have already become the recipients of our livestock guarding dog program. This is one of our landmark programs, and it's an extremely effective tool. 85% of farmers that receive livestock guarding dogs and start utilizing the method effectively see their losses to carnivores go to zero. So it's incredibly powerful. When we first started the program in 2013, only 4% of farmers in the area were actually using livestock guarding dogs. And now 40% of farmers are utilizing them with their small stock herds. We focus on using the Tswana dogs, the local dogs, what's known as the landrace dogs, the dogs that the environment has evolved. They are incredibly well adapted to the environment, local diseases, the climate, the food that traditionally is fed to dogs, and really they bond with the small stock herds, and they will go out with the herds out into the veld and protect them from any harm. Not only carnivores, but theft is also a great challenge. And in 2020, we were able to expand our livestock guarding dog program by working with our model farmers from our farmers networks. These are farmers doing great responsible livestock farming in the Kalahari. And we trained them to host livestock guarding dog puppies at their farms. And so we could double the number of livestock guarding dogs that we placed with farmers in need. We now have 110 active livestock guarding dogs across the landscape, and most of these actually come from animal shelters. A lot of people don't sterilize their animals, so there's a lot of unwanted puppies, and many of them get euthanized. So we give these puppies a second chance at life at Livestock Guardians, and that means that their farmers no longer feel motivated to remove cheetahs and other carnivores. As well as this, we've trialed and piloted and promoted different conflict mitigation methods, such as different enclosure designs, deterrent devices using scent, sound, and lights, ear tags to monitor cattle movements, the use of livestock guarding donkeys, which can be an effective tool, all to reduce the conflict, not only with cheetahs, but with all of the carnivores in the landscape. Communities are not particular about carnivores. If they're having wild dog conflict, if they're having lion conflict, jackal conflict, they'll be intolerant towards all of those carnivores. So we have to address human-carnivore conflict as a whole. And the need for more sustainable farming methods is more important than ever. As human populations increase and government policies evolve, we have found livestock farming encroaching further into areas of wilderness. This area in grey here has recently been rezoned as livestock grazing and was once a wildlife management area. And it's part of the corridor that goes from the two protected areas. So we have to work very hard to make sure that farmers are aware and we can still maintain that corridor. Now, livestock is now encroaching into this circle here in the black, closer to the central Kalahari Game Reserve, and that's where an even greater challenge is being experienced by farmers, and that is living with lions. And we have started a new program, a collaboration with Tarleton and Texas A&M universities that's being funded by the Lion Recovery Fund and the US Department of Agriculture to understand this, what is happening in these areas. Our research team is working closely with the farmers to better understand their perceptions towards living with lions and other large carnivores, and what tools and what solutions can have relevance and impact for them so they're not involved in retaliatory killings. We've also managed to collar 3 lions this year, which is a great challenge as they're incredibly elusive in this landscape. And we are looking at their wildlife, at the lion movements, particularly in relation to the cattle posts and livestock operations. And the lion in the purple going into the Central Kalahari Game Reserve is being extremely polite and well-behaved and spending most of his time in the protected area. In red, we have a female Pele, and she is also staying in the Aqua Valley area. She's recently had 2 cubs, which is really exciting. And she's also not getting involved in livestock conflict. But the lion we see here in the blue has decided that he loves going to cattle posts, and he's going to keep on predating on livestock. So it's caused, so we've nicknamed him Matata because he is such a lot of trouble for us, and he's really creating challenging interactions between the farmers and the researchers. So we have developed an early warning system for those farmers so we can let them know when Matata is coming into their area, and they can start to bring in their livestock closer to their cattle posts. We're also utilizing camera traps at all of the cattle posts, as well as around our 2 focal area communities in the middle of the wildlife corridor. And they take pictures of all the wildlife passing through. All the pictures of carnivores basically are being utilized to develop a conservation performance payment program, which will directly reward farmers and the communities with payments and incentives to support them to coexist with large carnivores. And of course, not only does reducing conflict and securing reducing conflict and working with the farmers extremely important, we also have to make sure that our research work influences policy. As I mentioned, we are experiencing movement of livestock farming into wilderness areas. So we continue to use track surveys to monitor wildlife across this region. And we're so honored to work with these Kalahari San, who have an amazing indigenous knowledge. They can tell which species, the age, the gender, even the health condition of the animals from the tracks that they see in the sand. And this gives us the ability to monitor elusive species. And we've collated 5 years of track survey data into these maps to show which are the real hotspots for wildlife in this landscape. And up the top there, you can see that is going into the livestock farming areas recently dezoned, as well as over onto the left. And we have now, with these maps, been able to inform the government's future land use management plans and secure those areas as corridors, making sure that that connectivity, which is so essential for the semi-arid, delicate Kalahari landscape, is conserved. But as well as reducing conflict and securing corridors, it's essential that we work with local communities to diversify livelihoods, to benefit more directly from their natural and cultural resources, and give them an opportunity to develop livelihoods beyond livestock farming. And so here to talk more about our Communities for Conservation program is Katleho Kolanyane Kasupile. She has a master's in human rights and culture and is leading our Indigenous knowledge preservation initiatives. Thank you so much, Kat.
Thanks a lot, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. And I would like to thankfully just say, framing what we do in terms of our research as well as our farming for conservation departments. But as CCB, we honestly say that these classifications are purely about focus because we're all working towards ensuring that we promote coexistence in the Hansi district and across Botswana at large. Now, my story about the first cheetah that I saw has not quite as much activity as Rebecca's because it took very high levels of zoom on a camera as we were high levels of zooming on a camera as we were making our way back from the Kalahari Transfrontier Park following my very first mid-year review with CCB. And I'm one of those conservationists who believes that the wild should stay in the wild. And so as a result, this is one of the things that has made me so passionate about the kind of work that we do with communities to ensure that when they don't have the privilege of choosing to be or not to be with the wild, and some of them through the exercises we've done have said that the separation is not an advantage to them because wildlife is intrinsically tied to the ways of life that they've had for generations. So in 2017, we did some participatory consultations with the communities of that are overseen by two trusts, being Aushikaulu and Kuskurusa. And these communities are in Bere, Kakae, East and West Hanahai. And in those consultations, we found that they had realized that they wanted to diversify the ways in which they were able to prosper and thrive. And this meant moving away from agriculture, which is the trajectory that is often there, and moving towards using cultural and natural resources as a means of sustaining themselves. And you might wonder what this looks like. This is harnessing tracking skills. It means wild fruit harvesting and medicinal plant harvesting. It means visual arts, what we would otherwise call traditional performance arts, and various other forms of cultural heritage that already exist within the communities. And so we then were tasked with finding ways of ensuring that we could make this task of ours, this big dream of theirs, a reality, because we have, again, as we work with wildlife, we also recognize that the wildlife live with people. And just recently, we were assigned funding to establish a craft center along the Trans-Kalahari Highway, at which we will then be using this space to highlight some of the crafts that have been produced by these various communities. These will also allow us to move into areas that have not been explored yet at this moment. In this area, it is experimentational because things like ecotourism and cultural tourism have yet to be explored in this area. But this is something that the communities themselves are willing to explore with us. As we continue to do this, we understand the role of professionalization. So we have been engaging experts to ensure that we're upskilling the communities so that they're able to produce at market readiness, rather than just saying, this is great art, it's from poor communities, therefore it should be valued. We want to enable the communities to be as professional in self-governing their projects as well as producing commercially viable at a local, a regional, and an international level products. This also goes into looking at some of the knowledge that is there. We know, for example, the San, along all the multiple segmentations of them, are highly knowledgeable on natural plants. However, with these natural plants, it's not just a matter of grabbing and going. There is great knowledge invested in knowing where, how, and what things are used for. And with this greater knowledge, we have been working with various communities in different in different activities such as harvesting from wild products, and also ensuring that we are making sure that each one of the avenues through which they are practicing is viable and sustainable and able to be professionalized. Now, let us use the example of these traditional brewed medicines that are sold on the roadside at the moment. It's all well and good that it may work for some people, but client trust, consumer trust, is something that is very important. And if we are to get them to move beyond it being an indigenous at-home recipe to being a professionalized product, it requires them to not only understand it, but also value the movement from the knowledge as it is to the knowledge as it could be commercially viable. And we want to ensure that these knowledges are also shared across generations. It is not a matter of simply saying we want to have one thing and then move on and forget the rest. One of these skills that is also very important that we have been able to start harnessing is tracking. Using the tracking, we've managed to, over 2020, train about 20 members of the communities who have then gone on to do natural resource surveys. And this tracking as a skill assists in going further than just knowing how to follow animals. But again, as we've spoken about natural resource surveys, knowing and mapping how land use could be done based on the wildlife that is available, based on some of the growth that is around the areas that the people live in. And one of the great discoveries that we had through the tracking process when we were between the villages of East Hanahai and West Hanahai lies Okwa Valley. And in Okwa Valley, there was a discovery of previously undocumented sites that were, as you can see here, these are spear sharpening rocks that were used by nomadic hunters. And so they were not discovered, they were registered. And by their registration and recognition, we at CCB then alerted the Department of Museums, who then did their own survey and found that there was actual value in what had been recognized by the trackers. And that has assisted us in getting the area to be no longer designated as grazing lands, but it is now going to be declared the Okwa Conservation Area. So it is in making sure that some of these natural resources that, again, would be taken for granted because they are there, we know that they're there. It goes without saying that a surface well that was used by nomadic hunters, or even those spear sharpening rocks, are not valueless, especially to the communities in ways that they can start branching out into different forms of tourism, but also can benefit greater humanity. We, as our development and engagement work, also are happy to partner with an organization called Learn to Play. And Learn to Play offers early childhood education, which is valuable in that the model that we employ is that the mothers and women within the communities are then trained to deliver this environmentally and culturally specific or culturally relevant curriculum that then allows the students to not only start learning within their home settings, but we enable the communities to retain the skills and continuously grow and hand down from generation to generation. One of the other benefits that we got is that we were granted, following the 2017 consultations, we were sent out on a mission to go and find the right source of money to enable this cultural work to be done. And we were fortunate enough to be granted the Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation by the US Department of State. And that project is now rolling out over the next 3 years, through which we have gone back again to consult with the communities to figure out what are the skill sets that are there, who knows what, how can we take it from something that is just generally known into practice that is also archived and valued. So protection is at the core of the kind of work that we're doing here. We're not just about you've got knowledge, therefore produce. The process is as important, if not even more valuable, because the loss of the process results in the loss of the cultural relevance. And so we have been going around and doing consultations with various members of the communities to find out what the knowledge sets that are available, and ensuring that it isn't just a matter of us as CCB saying, do this, register that is important. One of the other great developments that we have is to acknowledge that each one of these things that I've spoken about requires a home. So we're actively raising funds for the various projects that we're working on. As you can see over here, this is the plans for one of the Learn to Play schools. So at present, the schools take place, the play groups are done at the Khotla, and where the Khotla is in use for official use, they then have to go and sit under a tree somewhere and continue giving the education. So now we want to ensure that they've got places that they can have as their own homes, their own shelters, where it is an institution in and of itself. We've also been granted land near the village of Bere. Bere, it lies about 2 hours away from Ranzi. Now, that's 2 hours from our camp. It takes us 2 hours to go from camp to go to Bere to do work. So that means if you want to be there for a 7 o'clock start, you're already waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we're happy to have this land because it enables us to not only be closer to the communities, but also with our field teams, it gives them some space to not have to rush to camp under unfavorable conditions. It also gives the community stakeholders a space where they can go and meet for strategy meetings. And this space will have staff housing, it will have a campsite, a tented campsite, and our offices as well. And the other announcement that is great for us, I'm going to give to Rebecca to let you know what is on the horizon for CCB.
Thank you so much, Kat. Yeah, so as we're approaching 20 years of existence as Cheetah Conservation Botswana, we have outgrown our current residence on a rented piece of farmland. And last year, thanks to WCN donors and supporters, we were able to buy CCB's forever home. We've mapped out the plans. We've got staff housing, our offices, our solar array, cheetah enclosures, our new livestock guarding dog demonstration farms, and also visitors accommodation, and of course our education center for bringing in our kids to the environmental bush camps. And this is an extremely exciting development. Of course, we welcome all support towards this because we just felt like we would do all of these developments for our 20 years, but it just happened to all come at a very similar time. So lots of expansion, lots of exciting work for us all ahead. And our wonderful CCB team is working hard to reduce conflict, to learn more about carnivores in this incredible Western Kalahari landscape, to diversify livelihoods and increase environmental awareness. And of course, it is a team effort. And it is thanks to WCN for selecting us as partners nearly 20 years ago, and all of the incredible WCN family, many of which are here today, which has made it possible for us to achieve all of this. So a huge thanks from our cheetah family, from the carnivores in the Western Kalahari, from the incredible communities which also share the land, and from all of us in Cheetah Conservation Botswana. Thank you so much.
Okay, that was wonderful. Please stay on stage with me.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Katlego and Rebecca. Just putting it out there that there's no relationship between my skirt and Cheetah Conservation, in case anyone is wondering. So we have time just for one more question. Sorry, one question only. So someone would like to find out if you can talk more about the Conservation Initiative programs, just how it's structured, as well as how the community members are compensated.
The conservation
success
payment approach. Yes, so this is a program that we are in, is still in development phase. So we're with the camera traps at the cattle posts and around the communities. And in that landscape, in that corridor landscape, we're developing the wildlife baselines. We're also working with the community to develop the payment mechanisms through the community trusts, along with groups of women and elders, to make sure that all of the different Our groups within the community are represented, so when they select what they would like those funds to go towards, it is considered to be inclusive, that everyone has a say. So we intend to, well, we'll finish those wildlife baselines towards the end of the year, and then the program will initiate and the payments will initiate early in 2024.